My 3D camera tracker has finished solving and analysing and solving the footage. So what you may see on yours, if yours has done that, if you select this effect just by clicking on its name, you'll probably see a whole bunch of little multicolored crosses all over your footage. And if you run your cursor over the footage, you'll get this strange bullseye looking target thing that pops up, that spins around and goes crazy all over your footage. As you scrub through the timeline, you'll see that hopefully these points are sticking onto your footage. There's a little bit of a delay as you scrub through sometimes, so don't worry too much if there's a bit of lag as you're looking at your footage. So these are all the little tracking points, the little bits of data, visual data, that After Effects has identified and figured out as points in 3D space. Now, one thing that we have to do first is we have to tell After Effects where the ground is, and we have to tell it where the middle of our 3D scene is going to be. After Effects has no idea which way is up, so if we don't tell it which way is up, it might track our camera on its side or pointing at the sky or all over the place. What I usually do is I try and look for an area of my footage where I know I'm going to put some graphics, and I try and set that up with a ground plane and an origin, a center of our 3D scene. For this project or this exercise, what I'm going to do is I want some 3D text hanging in space in the walkway here. So you could imagine as you're walking through into Ara, there's some graphics hanging in space here above the walkway with our logo on it. So this area here is kind of where I want the middle of my world to be with all my graphics in it. So what I want to try and do is find where the ground is here. Now if I run my cursor around on the ground here, I can see I get this little red bullseye thing popping up, and it changes position depending on whereabouts I put my mouse. So what's happening here is that every time we run our cursor over these points, After Effects is creating a triangular plane that connects three of these points together, and the bullseye is to give us some idea of the perspective of that space that it's showing us. Now, this is where a little bit of visual judgment comes in, and you need to be able to sort of look at perspective critically and decide if you think you're in the right place. So this is not 100% science here, there's a bit of guesswork involved. One of the downsides of the 3D camera tracker in After Effects is that there's not a huge amount of adjustment that you can do to it if the track is not good. So we'll see how this goes anyway. So as I run my cursor around, I can see 3 points. I'll just zoom in a little bit there so hopefully you guys can see. So there's 3 points that I can see on the ground here. And when I run my cursor in the middle of them, my red bullseye looks like it's sitting kind of flat on the ground there. These 3 points look like they're all sitting on the ground. Now this ground is not going to be 100% flat. It's not going to be perfectly flat, so I know that this is not going to be 100% accurate, but hopefully it's going to be accurate enough for what we want to do. So I'm going to find this point here. Now your track might be slightly different from mine, but if you can find a point, sometimes you have to scrub backwards and forwards a few frames to try and find one of these points. But what I really want is this frame where I've got 3 tracking points on the concrete path. I want to make sure that they're all pretty much on a flat ground plane. Make sure that none of your points are halfway up one of these plants or halfway up the tree. Make sure, if you can, that you've got some that are all pretty much sitting on that concrete path. I'm about 14 seconds, 6 frames through my footage. You may have something different in yours, but I'm going to go with these 3 points. So what I'm going to do is when those 3 points are highlighted with that little target visible, I'm just going to click the mouse there and it will select those 3 points in that plane. We're going to tell After Effects this is the ground and this is the middle of our 3D world that we're going to track. So once I've selected that triangular plane there, all I need to do is right click it. And what I want to do is set the ground plane and origin. So that's us telling After Effects, that's the ground, that's the middle of our 3D world. Once I've done that, I can right click it again And what I'm going to create now is a solid. Remember, a solid is just an empty layer with a block cover. I'm going to create a solid and a camera. Once we've done that, now we should see in our composition window, we've got a 3D tracked camera and we've got a tracked solid. Now what we can do here to check how good this track is we can, I'm just going to grab a short bit of my timeline using the work bar, and I'm going to hit 0 on my keypad, and After Effects is going to go through and it's going to preview that sequence. And if our track is good, that solid that we've made should look like it's sitting on the ground and staying on the ground. Mine's looking pretty good. It looks like it's there, so I think I've probably got a preview. If you have a look at the effect, the 3D camera tracker effect, if you open up the Advanced tab and have a look at the average error value, if that's less than 1 pixel, mine's 0.2, then that generally indicates you've got a pretty accurate track. If it's way above 1 pixel, then you may not have a good track. You might have to try and retrack it. There is an option there for turning on detailed analysis, which basically just means the computer tries harder. Or if you really can't get a track, you may have to go and reshoot your footage. Maybe it's too blurry, or there's too much movement, maybe it's poorly exposed. But that average error value there will give you a reasonable indication of whether you've got a reasonable track, a really good track, or a completely hopeless track.